on the Polish government level, and I work with European Commission on the access to medical data and on artificial intelligence. And I was co-founder and president of a couple of startups, and one of the startups we actually created together with Wojtek in Kenya, and it was quite exotic story.
Yeah, so my name is Wojtek. In my previous life, I used to be a medical doctor. Shortly after starting my career in the medical university, I co-founded one of the biggest in terms of number of people humanitarian organizations. We were working in Central Eastern Africa in mission hospitals for a couple of years. Then I actually came to a conclusion that more impact can be done by creating systems and working on the frontier, not only geographically but also technologically. And that's when I became a healthcare entrepreneur. We are working with Lydia on a telemedicine startup in Kenya, bringing technology to remote areas far from civilization. And in a way, working at Data Lake feels also similar to my previous job and to my previous company, because we are also at the frontier, we are also at the forefront, we are also exploring, white spots on the map that previously no one ventured into. Yeah, but we are here for you guys, so let's
ask us anything.
Let's stop talking about ourselves and let's move into questions. Also, technically, we have a list of questions that you guys asked us before on the Telegram group, but we would be happy, to make it interactive. And if there is anything that you'd like to ask us, just fire us a message on the group, on the chat, and we'll be looking at it during that AMA. This is 1 hour for you guys. So basically, whatever comes to your mind, whether it's silly or it's actually a serious question about our business and business model, just go ahead and ask us anything.
Yeah, and about that, I wanted to add that this call is very informal, and then we are preparing contents which will be with a higher quality, with more exclusive content, and of course everything will come by the right time. This is just to, we gathered some questions that have been asked in the last couple months in the community, and we just took the chance to have a call so that you can also see who actually is behind this project now that we are at these early stages. So I will start already with the first question, which is, I've checked investors update on my email. So it's someone signed to our newsletter, and there is info about big interest in your product. Could you tell me, please, if it's only from Polish companies or if it is worldwide?
So first of all, thank you for being our investor. Without you on board, it wouldn't have been possible to onboard fantastic members of our team like Dini and Andrea. And after that, I'll give the voice to Lydia.
Yeah, so we are in advanced discussions with Polish medical startups, and with one of them we actually signed some document about the first data flow, and we are in a discussion with international companies like pharmaceutical companies and technology companies too. So even if we are speaking with their Polish branches, it's like international company, right? So it's not only Polish companies.
Yeah, and I wanted to just add on from that. One of the first things that I said when I was actually in my interview for this position was I knew immediately that this was an international project, right? The whole point of this project is to get good, high quality representative medical data, and that has to be international by default. And so while, let's say, because of Wojciech and Lydia's status in the medical community in Poland and their expertise and their connections, we've started in Poland in terms of making the first data connection. We are really setting our sights internationally. And I'm saying this because it's come up a few times in the chat. We're definitely an international project. We have our sights set internationally. First steps first, but as soon as we are ready, then international is absolutely the scope of partners that we're looking at and for.
Plus, just a short remark to add. If you look at who buys the data globally, these are mostly research consortia, which are by nature decentralized. So scientific scientists from different countries, from different universities working together. These are global corporations working on discovery of new therapies, of new drugs, of new diagnostic methods, and these are AI startups who are also, digitally native, and they come from all over the world. So even though we start here and we want to place our foot on the ground firmly here because it's just easier for us, then the demand for the data actually comes from the huge market players that are not local, even though they have local branches.
That was pretty exhaustive. I will go directly to the next one because we have many of them. This is a question that I remember, so it was quite recent. The question was, what prevents a researcher or anyone else who buys the data for research or other purposes to resell that data online? Now, I get that the data, I mean, people are not very familiar on how data works, and that's exactly why data lake exists, because actually people should know that their data has a value and they should know how to actually exploit that value. So of course, there are many doubts that may arise on how would you handle my data? Can the researcher resell it, etc., etc.? So please, can a researcher or anyone else who buys the data resell the data online?
So basically, a researcher who is a data recipient of data collected by our system can't resell data. And firstly, that's because of agreements that we'll sign with that researcher, that he or it, if it's company, can use only this data for only this purpose that is stipulated in the agreement. Secondly, even if someone had with us an agreement but wanted to resell the data, for example, without us knowing about it, when you conduct some medical research, you should have an information where your data came from. And for example, some organizations can simply ask you where are the data from, and if you don't have an answer or you don't have the data from the legal source, your medical research can be, just cancelled. Yes, invalid. So so there is always an option that somebody will resell the data, but it's actually not very useful. And finally, we are creating the system that will give an access to medical data, but not basically the medical data itself. So we will provide our data recipients with the platform where medical data will be, implemented, and they will have an option to conduct some research, etc. But they won't simply, download the data to the computer and resell it to the other parties, right? So it can be a little bit hard. You can always do a print screen, but if we are talking about, for example, 100,000 of data, it can be a problem.
Yeah, so to sum up, we are securing the data by legal means, and these are powerful means because we are dealing with big companies who cannot risk assuming that kind of legal responsibility. And that's also one of the reasons why the medical data market is not fluid right now, because people are afraid of breaking the law and doing it uncompliantly. And with time, obviously, because we are a blockchain tech company, we also want to put in place technological barriers just to make it not possible physically or technologically.
Okay, we have another question, kind of similar, again, about concerns about the usage of data. So the question is, it is very relevant who buys the data. How is it checked that a researcher is legitimate? What is a legitimate researcher, first of all? A university researcher, maybe a big pharma, a researcher in the EU, a researcher in any part of the world. So who can buy the data, actually? I think I can recap the question in this really simple sentence.
So actually, anyone can have an access to medical data collected on our system. But the important thing is the aim of using this medical data. So the aim, so assessment of the aim of reusing this medical data will be conducted by trust entities, in Poland by Donate Your Data Foundation. And we are actually working on the checklist that will help us determine which purposes for data use are legitimate.
So, it's also an interesting point, because how we think about ourselves is we think about data lake as a company, as a system that democratizes the access to data. So why democratizes? Because the way it looks right now is that small startups or small, agile teams of researchers don't have an easy life accessing data for developing breakthrough solutions. For bigger entities and bigger corporations, it's easier, and they do have their chance. And what we would like to achieve is to give a universal democratic access to the data. We don't want to exclude people from the data economy only because they are from a separate, from a given country, or because they are a small entity. So that is, a very important thing for us. But it's a very valid question, because naturally, we also have to verify that we are not selling the data to, let's say, an insurance agency who would hike the insurance prices for our patients, and that obviously will be done. But there will be no criteria excluding people from certain countries or certain race or any other factor that that we could think about.
Right. How is our medical data being traded, or right now? I mean, before data lake, how is our data being traded, if it is actually traded?
Yeah, so it's not like it is, but the process is actually very difficult. And it looks like that, for example, if we have hospital that is like clinical hospital, which has cooperation with university, for example, it has to collect patient's consent. Like it collects patient consent mostly in paper form. And this consent is for using this particular medical data from this particular patient, from this particular hospital for this particular medical research. And it actually is used mostly and only actually by hospitals and medical universities, and it's not, shared with other entities and companies, even if they work on R&D purposes, so research and development purposes. So it's right now it's very limited when it comes to access to medical data. It's a huge problem in Poland, but it's a huge problem in whole Europe also.
Basically, in all the countries that agree as a society that it's important to respect the privacy of its citizens. It's not the case of all the countries, of course. There are some countries that do not do it. These are not the countries inside of the European Union, but in these countries, the access to the medical data naturally is easier, but also the quality and the trustworthiness of that data is lower. So we have a situation where data that is potentially worth a lot, because it comes from trusted entities, because it comes from a certain population with a certain disease pattern and aging society, and that particular data that is very interesting for researchers, because most of the drugs and new therapies are for civilization diseases and age-related diseases. That data is not available, and yeah, as Liga said, companies go to long extents to have access to the data. They also, verge on the thin red line of what's legal and what's illegal. But the need is so great that they still decide to do it, and we just think there is a better way. We don't have to do anything in the shadow. We don't have to do such processes inefficiently, and we also believe it's time to change the way it's done, because it's ridiculous how it looks right now.
Yeah, and we strongly believe that every patient has a right to decide what's going on with their data, with their medical data. So it's the only way to go, actually.
It's logical, because what's the other way of ensuring access to data if not by us giving a consent? It's only when the government takes it from us, and I don't think that would happen in the societies we live in. Or there is no other way. So we just think it's a very logical solution from a civilization point of view, and at the point where we've already agreed that privacy is important, there is no other way of ensuring access to the data.
And European Commission thinks the same, so we are on the right path.
The next question is quite specific. I think it comes from someone who works in healthcare, works with data. So I will ask you by voice, but I will also write it in the chat because I understand it will be quite difficult to follow. So this user said, I know that this data in medical facilities is not entirely complete, but it changes from year to year and it's getting better thanks to the imposed HL7 CDA standards. Would you like to download all this data from the P1 platform and anonymize it before passing it to the buyer? And when will the documentation download take place? When the patient is registered on your website, the P1 platform will be asked for this data or not?
So I think that for this question to bring value to more members of our community, it requires giving a little bit of background. What is the P1 platform? And can you do it, Ligia?
Sure. So P1 platform is the one central system that we have in Polish that in Poland, sorry, that collects actually even not medical data, but indexes of medical data. So on the P1 system, we have some parts of medical data, for example, e-prescription or e-referrals. E-prescription are very popular. So you, for sure, what we are talking about. But some parts, actually most part of electronic health records, for example, medical images or diagnosis or laboratory tests, they are not stored on P1 system. And this is very important to say it, because on P1 system there is only index of where medical data is stored. So there is no central system that stores all of our medical history. Having said that, being integrated with P1 system would help with, for example, collecting e-prescriptions. But e-prescriptions can be collected also directly from the hospitals. And we are working right now on integrating our solution with targeted hospitals. Then we'll run a targeted Donate Your Data campaign in that hospital. And after this campaign, we'll collect the data from the patients that gave their consent directly from the hospital. And it's beneficial for us because we'll collect more data that is right now indexed on P1 platform. For example, we'll collect medical images that are not indexed on P1 system, because there is also there is only an index of diagnosis, not medical image. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered the question because it was a long question.
So in plain English, the question was, there is a central platform for the medical data in Poland. We do not intend to download the medical data from the central platform. We'll go hospital by hospital, preferably to big hospitals, preferably to hospital networks, and integrate with repositories that are easiest for us.
Probably in the future we'll think about P1 platform, but not for this year, probably.
Okay, I will ask real quick a question that is connected to this topic, and then I will ask the question that arises at least twice today, but I will not say it already. So the question is, do you store the downloaded data and create your own database, or are the data deleted after the transfer to the receiver?
Yeah, so personal data are deleted. So we are thinking about storing anonymized medical data, but probably you won't do it for the first data flow cases.
Okay. Yeah, as I anticipated, it was quite a simple question. Now, there is a question by a user that is actually joining the call, so I will give priority to that.
User.
Yeah, the name is Asker, and he or she is asking, why did you choose to deploy on Polygon? And also, we had another conversation a couple of hours ago on the topic, so we would like to know the opinion from you too.
Dini, can you take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So really the primary consideration for us was that it had to be on a public network. So we are creating a database of, or a blockchain record of people's consent. It has to be fully verifiable by anyone because we want it to be transparent. We want to have a permanent record on the blockchain where there's no question about someone's consent status. And the only way to do that is through a public blockchain. So this was one of our primary considerations. Second is also speed and scalability. We expect this to grow really quite enormously, especially as we start our international campaigns. And so having a fast network and a scalable network was also really important. So those were, I think, the primary considerations, as well as low transaction fees on the Polygon network. And then Wojciech, if you want to add anything onto that.
EVM compatibility, so it's also easier to write the smart contracts on the Polygon network. Plus, I think that what also comes into play, because there are many dozens of blockchains that are, privacy focused, or they implement zero knowledge proofs and so on and so on. But most of them are quite small and still untested. While the Polygon network has been there for years, obviously, as any blockchains, they have had their hiccups. But so far, it's the biggest, the most stable, and the trustworthy layer 2 and EVM compatible blockchain. And for us, it's like the main point of concern to build on a blockchain that is stable and that is trustworthy, and we know that's gonna be there in a couple of years. So we immediately excluded all the smaller blockchains because they have not been verified by the market yet, and Polygon is I'd say the only logical choice.
I agree with you. I mean, it's really the most important layer 2 of Ethereum, and Ethereum is the only blockchain that we can assume with a certain degree of certainty that is here to stay, while the others are just experiments that have been started in the last year or two maximum. The next question is still about the usage of medical data, and I mean, I'm really glad to see all these questions, because it means that we're doing our job right. Because if people are wondering, if people are asking themselves questions, then maybe we are moving something. So the question is, how would authorities know that the medical data is fraudulent, or maybe the system is just based on trust?
Yes. Firstly, we are collecting data from medical entities that are created in medical entities by medical doctors in the aim of, diagnosing and treating patients. So I actually cannot imagine the case that this data is fraudulent, because it's like illegal, and it would make no sense, right? Because it's directly from medical entity.
It also depends what do you mean by fraudulent, but basically that would be a part of medical documentation that was both made by the doctor and given to the patient. There were many other projects before, and there are some still right now that postulate something that is called the personal medical records on the blockchain, and these projects would like to encourage patients to upload their own medical records on the blockchain, on the chain, and make it available to researchers. And in that kind of particular application, yes, we come at a high risk of fraudulent data, because somebody can cook a data set, upload it on the blockchain, being only an individual user, and you are never sure whether that data is even real, whether it comes from that patient or other patient. And most of the times, this kind of data is also incomplete. So as a researcher, you may not have the full picture of the situation. But when you download the medical data from the facilities, they usually have complete data, and they are usually to be trusted. A separate question is the quality of the documentation in medical facilities. And I'm the last to throw the stone, because sometimes doctors are tired and they don't fill in all the necessary blank pages in the documentation that is a few meters long. And yes, it sometimes happens. So sometimes the quality of the documentation is not as desired by the researchers, but still I wouldn't call it a fraudulent documentation. So I would make this important distinction about the documentation that the patient sends on the blockchain, and this is something that we are not doing for this particular reason, that we just know that this data is usually of poor quality, and there is the medical documentation from the hospitals, which shouldn't be fraudulent. It's never fraudulent.
Yeah, and some parts of this medical data are standardized, and they are objective actually, because when we are talking about medical images like CT scans or X-ray scans or laboratory tests, you actually can't, I don't know, manipulate this data, right?
Yeah, so I think it was a very interesting question, and it really kind of goes back to the basics of the projects when we are still thinking about which direction to go. Should we give people the possibility of uploading their own medical records and so on and so on? And we came to a conclusion that what we pursue right now is the way to go. But thanks for this question, because it's a discussion that we had so much time ago that we've almost forgotten.
It brings back memories, old memories.
You're on.
Great. A more practical question now. A user asked, with which healthcare provider are you conducting tests? And the second question is, are you in discussion with our MZ?
Are we allowed to answer that question without our lawyer?
I don't think so, but okay, so we right now we cannot tell publicly where we are conducting our tests. Maybe it will change in the next month. When it comes to Ministry of Health, we definitely cannot say it right now publicly.
So I'm getting heart emojis from our lawyer right now on Slack.
Like, don't say it.
Yeah, but guys, on a serious note, once we are in a position to formalize, you'll be the first one to get to know, and we are serious about sharing all the progress that we legally can share with you as our closest community and our investors and supporters of the project. So we won't keep that in secret for too long, because we don't want to. But unfortunately, so far we have. I suppose that within incoming weeks it will change, and yeah, we'll make an exciting announcement.
Like with the first data recipient.
True.
And just kind of from the, let's say, marketing community perspective, for those of you who have been in other projects where they like to sell hopium and big announcements that either never materialize or aren't true, we are very, very much operating in a different kind of way. We are a very serious project with serious fundamentals, and already we have serious partnerships. So if you've been paying attention to our newsletter, you've probably seen that every month we have new partnerships to announce, and that's not going to stop, and that's really what we're focused. But we are definitely, as I said, quite intent on announcing what we're able to announce, working really hard on everything else behind the scenes to be able to announce that, when it's the right time, when everything's been signed, confirmed. And for sure, this community, as well as our newsletter, you guys will always be the first to hear, as Wojciech said.
Yeah. Also, just for you to know and understand, we are also operating in a kind of traditional and conservative sector, which is healthcare. Which has to make us more prudent in our communication about the partners, about the entities with which we speak to, had we been a gaming project or a DeFi project. So maybe that's why we also don't announce everything once we work on something. But as Dini has beautifully said, as always, it will be announced to the community when the time comes.
Right. I noticed a couple of questions that were made by a user who's actually in the call, who's listening to us, so I will move to them. The first one is, what do you see for the future of the project in the next year? And how about the next 5 years? And it's a question that I really like because I hope it gives you two the chance to really talk about data lake, not at the stage it is now. I mean, we haven't done an IDO yet. We're still building day by day, but to try to give the idea of how data lake will be in a couple of years from now. So what is the real mission of data lake, and how we will achieve it? So please, how will data lake be in 1 year from now and in 5 years?
All right, so I'll take that one. So just to give you a feeling of how it feels within our company, there is a new market that is forming right now, a blue ocean market that is for the taking, and it's at its nascent stages. And nobody is really monetizing that market, and that market is a market for the medical data. People are not doing it because it hasn't been possible technologically, legally, for the past years, and we think that right now it's the right moment. Why? There are several factors. So healthcare is changing. So through the COVID pandemic, the digitization of healthcare and what we have in terms of medical data in the digital form has grown exponentially. People are used to interacting with healthcare providers through a computer, and also people came to understand what is the value of the medical data and how much it's needed, because it affected our everyday lives through more than a year of the pandemic. So that's one factor. I'd say it is societal and technological change brought to us by the pandemic, by necessity. The second change is that we see where the regulatory and the legal environment is basically going. And a month ago, slightly more than a month ago, the European Commission announced a new regulation that governs the use of the data in the European Union, called the Data Governance Act. And it's a very long document, but in short, the European Union wants to make the data available, wants to promote the formation of entities that they call the data altruism entities and data intermediary services providers. And basically, in a very long and complicated document, they write about Web3 solutions and compensating the patients without using the word Web3. And we are at least a year ahead of everybody else who's just seen this kind of new direction in the policies of the European Union. And one of the barriers that has been there for years, which is a legal barrier, is slowly starting to crack. So technology is already there. We have stable blockchains that we didn't have a couple of years ago. Legal barriers are, being brought down by the European Commission itself. So, from top down, society is craving, and it's desperate to actually be able to govern and manage our own data, because I have that kind of feeling that some of us, or most of us, are already sick of Facebook and other big companies roaming freely on our data without our knowledge, our control, and us being entitled to the compensation. So this kind of social momentum and social justice movement, it's also quite relevant recently, and broadly speaking, the privacy movement. And it all sort of converges at this particular point of time we are at right now. And so that was the background. And where we think we are gonna be in 5 years is basically, we think we have serious chances of being one of the biggest players, or a default solution for gaining access to medical data, and perhaps to data as such. Because for now we are collecting consents for the use of the medical data, but the consents for the use of the data can be much, much broader. So we think that if we establish this type of new solution of gaining access to tremendously valuable data, it can be multiplied to other verticals, to other industries. In a year, we would be very, let's say, business focused and pragmatic, because we have to make it work. We have to prove to all the big partners and healthcare market players that what we have done, it's actually legal, it's secure, it's transparent, it works, it's accepted by the society. So for a year to come, I see ourselves, doing good job, integrating further hospitals, speaking to data buyers, and building a donation system like blood donation that was built in one country, and now it's all over the world, and people universally recognize both the importance and the let's say ethical assumptions behind it.
Yeah, so to give you that feeling that we have, that we are actually the one and only, and for sure the first one in Europe when it comes to this reusage of medical data based on consents. We had a meeting. We had a meeting of working group under European Commission about Data Governance Act, and we were invited to provide a presentation about our data lake data donation system. And you know, other speakers were talking about how to provide the content of consent, how to cooperate with universities, blah blah blah. And we actually were the one and only that showed like the system to collect the consent and showed that you can check the consent and it's done, and it's actually saved on the blockchain technology. So that was a wonderful feeling, and it was like practical solution for all the questions that they had and that they discussed during that meeting. And we strongly believe that in the near future, a lake token can be the currency of medical data, the currency that provides secure and transparent way to share the medical data, transparent for patient, transparent for data recipient, and transparent for data providers. And using the like normal currency wouldn't give us that, and it's very important.
Nothing to add.
Yeah, the thing I appreciated the most, apart from all you said, is the smile that you have when the others is talking. And I mean, it really gives the feeling of determination of being part of this team, embrace this mission for the long term. So I hope you notice also these little details because that really excites me too. So I will go, following this lead, I will go to the last question. It has been an intense 30 minutes, almost 40 minutes. The last question is a bit more sentimental. It says, what motivated you to start this project in the first place? And how did you get the idea for the medical data? So we go back to the history of Data Lake. How did you two come up with this idea?
Andrea, how much time do we have?
It's a long story. Actually, me and Wojtek, we always got involved in projects that potentially changed the world. So it was like a default option for us to get involved in that kind of project, right?
Yes, and also I'll give you an honest answer. So when you're a medical doctor and when you practice, you influence one person's life at a time, hugely. And you see the gratitude, you see the smile, sometimes you see other emotions, but the reward that you get from practicing is very high. But also it's only one person at a time. And sometimes the impact of your work is seen, only after many years, or not seen at all, because you don't see that patient never again. And it makes sense to us that working on something that creates a broad universal framework in healthcare lets us influence more patients than by working as a doctors and working with one patient at a time. Also, when we look, at statistics, because we are also numbers people, when we look at the statistics, what really drove the life expectancy in medicine and what drove the general health of the society is, of course, daily work of doctors who work long hours and work with patients every day, but it's also changing the mindset of the whole industry. And it happened on several occasions when medicine discovered antiseptics, when we discovered anesthesia, when we discovered antibiotics, and so on. And we just believe that giving access to the medical data can be a breakthrough similar to inventing antibiotics or to inventing general anesthesia and first operations.
It's actually not a belief, because whole medicine is based on evidence-based medicine. So the medicine that is based on data, on medical data. So access to data is absolutely crucial for inventing any of technologies, drugs.
I'll tell you a story that I like very much, that influenced me personally and made me to think about the power of the data. And the history is of a disease called sepsis. For those ones who don't know, sepsis is kind of, a general infection while we have the bacteria or viruses in our bloodstream, and it's a potentially deadly disease. And for years and years and years, millions of people were dying out of sepsis, and doctors didn't have an easy way of distinguishing which person that is admitted to the hospital is in a risk of death from sepsis and which one is not, which one should be treated aggressively and admitted to the intensive care unit, and which one can be sent home. And for years and years, it wasn't clear, until in the United States there were introduced electronic medical records that allowed analysis of the data and discovery of a correlation between one simple laboratory parameter, which is called the lactate level, and the risk of death of that patient from sepsis in coming 2 or 3 days, right? And that allowed us to introduce a procedure of measuring the lactate levels in all patients who came at the risk of sepsis to the hospital, and being able to decide which ones should be admitted to the hospital and which ones can be sent home. And we are talking, not about hundreds, not about thousands, but about tens of millions of patients that are admitted to hospitals every day, and doctors have to make a decision, should they be sent home or admitted to the hospital with sepsis, right? And the impact it had through the, last 30 or 40 years since it was discovered, it's huge. It can't be overestimated. It's huge. And this is the kind of impact that we hope to achieve in data lake. Many things we still don't know that can be done with data, but if we look at the history, as I said, this could be a similar breakthrough to discovering antibiotics or antiseptics.
Yeah, and to give you very practical and specific answer where idea came from, we actually had Polish Hospital Federation had a lot of questions from the technology company, pharmaceutical company, and startups if Polish Hospital Federation can help them with access to medical data. And we knew that Polish hospitals actually cannot provide them with access to medical data because, the legal framework is just like that. They cannot do it in the transparent legal way, right? So we knew that there has to be trusted third party that will collect patients' consents to use that medical data. And we knew that this is very important for medicine development, and we just went for it.
Right, that was really interesting to hear. Also, the sepsis case. I think we're gonna talk more about that in a dedicated blog. Now, I think this conversation went to a natural ending. It has been 45 minutes and there's a lot of material to assimilate. But before ending, I will ask Dini to announce something that is happening tomorrow, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. So really exciting things going on. Just hearing about where we've come from, where we're headed, and I promise for those listening live and those who are going to be watching the recording, it's going to be an incredible year for Data Lake. And on that note, tomorrow we're starting our first big social media push, and along with that is coming a Gleam competition where you are going to be able to win access as a beta user to our first medical donation system, as well as potentially Lake prizes in tokens. So you can win either or both. And we are going to be launching this tomorrow. And obviously our community is going to be the first to hear about it. But for the ones who are listening in live right now, you guys will be absolutely the first in the know. And just keep an eye out on the Telegram group tomorrow, because we will be posting the link to that, and we are going to be setting it off and getting it started. So I just want to thank everyone who did listen in, and also for those who are going to be listening to the recording, thank you for taking the time to do so. Thank you, Wojciech and Ligia, for your leadership, your breadth of knowledge, your expertise, and your direction on this project, because really, the talent that we have here and the talent that you've assembled to make this idea happen really never ceases to amaze me. And I'm not just saying that, really, it's been an incredible ride so far. And I think we all agree that it's going to be an adventure going forward in the next years. Andrea as well, thank you for hosting this and for managing our community. And other than that, really excited that everyone's along with us for the ride.
Thank you, and huge thank you for our investors that provides us with the possibility to hire such a wonderful team. And thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We will have a few calls. I mean, we will have new calls in the next months. Why not? So I hope you all enjoyed it.
All right.
See
Good
you
night,
soon.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.